Tierra del Fuego, December 17th, 1832. Having now finished with Patagonia, I will describe our first arrival in Tierra del Fuego. A little afternoon we doubled Cape St. Diego and entered the famous Strait of Le Maire. We kept close to the Fuegan shore, but the outline of the rugged, inhospitable Staten Island was visible amidst the clouds. In the afternoon we anchored in the Bay of Good Success. While entering, we were saluted in a manner becoming the inhabitants of this savage land. A group of Fueguans, partly concealed by the entangled forest, were perched on a wild point overhanging the sea, and as we passed by, they sprang up and, waving their tattered cloaks, sent forth a loud and sonorous shout. Excuse me. The savages followed the ship, and just before the dark we saw their fire, and again heard their wild cry. The harbor consists of a fine piece of water, half surrounded by low, rounded mountains of clay slate, which are covered to the water's edge by one dense, gloomy forest. A single glance at the landscape was sufficient to show me how wildly different it was from anything I had ever beheld. At night it blew a gale of wind, and heavy squalls from the mountains swept past us. It would have been a bad time out at sea, and we, as well as others, may call this Good Success Bay. In the morning, the captain sent a party to communicate with the Fueguans. When we came within hail, one of the four natives who were present advanced to receive us and began to shout most vehemently, wishing to direct us where to land. When we were on shore, the party looked rather alarmed, but continued talking and making gestures with great rapidity. It was without exception the most curious and interesting spectacle I had ever beheld. I could not have believed how wide was the difference between savage and civilized man. It is greater than between a wild and domesticated animal, inasmuch as in man there is great power of improvement. The chief spokesman was old, and appeared to be the head of the family. The three others were powerful young men, about 6 feet high. The women and children had been sent away. These Fueguans are a very different race from the stunted, miserable wretches further to the westward. They are much superior in person, and seem closely allied to the famous Patagonians of the Strait of Magellan. Their only garment consists of a mantle made of guanaco skin, with the wool outside. This they wear just thrown over their shoulders, as often leaving their persons exposed as covered. Their skin is of a dirty, coppery red color. The old man had a fillet of white feathers tied round his head, which partly confined his black, coarse, and tangled hair. His face was crossed by 2 broad transverse bars. One painted bright red reached from the ear to ear, and included the upper lip. The other, white like chalk, extended parallel and above the first, so that even his eyelids were thus colored. Some of the other men were ornamented by the streaks of black powder made of charcoal. The party altogether closely resembled the devils, which come on the stage in such plays as the Der Frischutz. Their very attitudes were abject, and the expression of their countenances distrustful, surprised, and startled. After we had presented them with some scarlet cloth, which they immediately tied round their necks, they became good friends. This was shown by the old man patting our breasts and making a chuckling kind of noise, as people do when feeding chickens. I walked with the old man, and this demonstration of friendship was repeated several times. It was concluded by 3 hard slaps, which are given me on the breast and the back at the same time. He then bared his bosom for me to return the compliment, which being done, he seemed highly pleased. The language of these people, according to our notions, scarcely deserves to be called articulate. Captain Cook has compared it to a man clearing his throat, but certainly no European ever cleared his throat with so many hoarse, guttural, and clicking sounds. They are excellent mimics. As often as we coughed or yawned or made an odd motion, they immediately imitated us. Some of our party began to squint and look awry, but one of the young Fueguans, whose whole face was painted black except a white band across his eyes, succeeded in making far more hideous grimaces. They could repeat with perfect correctness each word in any sentence we address them, and they remembered such words for some time. Yet we Europeans all know how difficult it is to distinguish apart the sounds in a foreign language. Which of us, for instance, could follow an American Indian through a sentence of more than 3 words? All savages appear to possess, to an uncommon degree, this power of mimicry. I was told almost in the same words of the same ludicrous habits among the Caffres, the Australians likewise. I have long been notorious for being able to imitate and describe the gait of any man so that he may be recognized. How can this faculty be explained? Is it a consequence of the more practiced habits of perception and keener senses, common to all men in a savage state as compared to those long civilized? When a song was struck up by our party, I thought the Fuegians would have fallen down with astonishment. With equal surprise they viewed our dancing, but one of the young men, when asked, had no objection to a little waltzing. Little accustomed to Europeans as they appeared to be, yet they knew and dreaded our firearms. Nothing would tempt them to take a gun in their hands. They begged for knives, calling them by the Spanish word cuchilla. They explained also what they wanted by acting as if they had a piece of blubber in their mouth, and then pretending to cut instead of tear it. It was interesting to watch the conduct of these people towards Jemmy Benton, one of the Fuegians who had been taken during the former voyage to England. They immediately perceived the difference between him and the rest, and held much conversation between themselves on the subject. The old man addressed a long harangue to Jemmy, which it seems was to invite him to stay with them, but Jemmy understood very little of their language, and was moreover thoroughly ashamed of his countrymen. When York Minster, another of these men, came on shore, they noticed him in the same way, and told him he ought to shave, yet he had not 20 dwarf hairs on his face, whilst we all wore our untrimmed beards. They examined the color of his skin and compared it with ours. One of our arms being bared, they expressed the liveliest surprise and admiration at its whiteness. We thought that they mistook 2 or 3 of the officers, who were rather shorter and fairer, though adorned with large beards. For the ladies of our party, the tallest among the Fuegians was evidently much pleased at his height being noticed. When placed back to back with the tallest of the boat, its crew, he tried his best to edge on higher ground and to stand on tiptoe. He opened his mouth to show his teeth and turned his face for a side view, and all this was done with such alacrity that I dare say he thought himself the handsomest man in Tierra del Fuego. After the first feeling on our part of grave astonishment was over, nothing could be more ludicrous or interesting than the odd mixture of surprise and imitation which these savages every moment exhibited. The next day I attempted to penetrate some way into the country. Tierra del Fuego may be described as a mountainous country, partly submerged in the sea, so that deep islets and bays occupy the place where valleys should exist. The mountain-sized sides, except on the exposed western coast, are covered from the water's edge upwards by one great forest. The trees reach an elevation between 1,000 and 1,500 feet and are succeeded by a band of peat with eminent alpine plants, and this again is succeeded by the line of perpetual snow which, according to Captain King, in the Strait of Magellan, descends to between 3,000 and 4,000 feet. To find an acre of level land in any part of the country is most rare. I recollect only one little flat near Port Famine, of another of rare large extent near Gory Road. In both these cases, and in all others, the surface was covered by a thick bed of swampy peat. Even with the forest ground is concealed by a mass of slowly putrefying vegetable matter, which from being soaked with water yields to the foot.